My mother publicly accused me of an affair with her fiancé at the rehearsal dinner to cover up that my younger sister was actually trying to seduce him. When my sister sabotaged her wedding, she suddenly wanted me as her backup daughter. I, 32F, need to get this off my chest because the past few weeks have been insane. My mother Margot, 57F, has been calling me from different numbers and I had to block her email addresses twice already. My sister Allison, 27F, hasn't spoken to me in months and honestly, I'm fine with that. But let me start from the beginning because this whole mess goes back years. I grew up in Marlow Heights, which is this upscale neighborhood about 2 hours from where I live now in Metro Bay. Our house was called Hartwell Estate by my mother, who loved making everything sound fancy even though it was just a regular 4-bedroom colonial. She bought it with money from my grandparents, who she later cut off completely, but that's another story. My mother had me when she was 25. She was in her 3rd year of college studying business administration when she got pregnant. Her parents wanted her to finish school first, but she dropped out and kept me. This decision became the cornerstone of every conversation we ever had growing up. She reminded me at least once a week that she gave up her degree for me. She told me she could have been a corporate executive or a business owner, but instead she became a receptionist at a dental clinic because of me. When I got bad grades, she would say I was wasting the sacrifice she made. When I wanted to do after-school activities, she would calculate how much gas money it cost her to drive me around. I learned pretty quickly to keep my head down and not ask for much. I did my homework at the kitchen table without being told. I made my own lunches starting in 4th grade. I wore hand-me-downs from my cousin without complaining. My mother worked full-time and dated occasionally, but nothing serious until I was around 6 years old. That's when she met Richard. He was married with 2 kids of his own. I found this out years later from my cousin Lillian, 35F, who still lives in Marlow Heights. Lillian told me the whole neighborhood knew about the affair, but nobody said anything to my face because I was just a kid. The affair lasted about a year before Richard's wife found out and threatened to take everything in a divorce. Richard ended things with my mother immediately after that. My mother was a wreck for months. Then she found out she was pregnant. Richard didn't want anything to do with her at first, but eventually his lawyer worked out a child support arrangement. My sister Allison was born when I was 5, and suddenly everything changed in our house. The monthly checks from Richard were substantial. My mother quit her receptionist job and started working part-time at a boutique instead. She enrolled Allison in expensive preschool programs. She redecorated the entire house with new furniture. She started getting her hair done professionally every month. She bought herself a new car. Meanwhile, I was still wearing clothes from donation bins and packing peanut butter sandwiches for lunch. When I asked why Allison got new toys every week, my mother said it was because Allison's father actually took care of his responsibilities. She said my own father had disappeared before I was born and left her with nothing, so I should be grateful for what I had. Allison grew up knowing she was the favorite. By the time she was in elementary school, she had figured out she could do pretty much anything and get away with it. She broke my CD player when she was 7, and my mother made me apologize to her for leaving it where she could reach it. She told her friends at school that I was adopted, which caused me all kinds of problems until a teacher called my mother for a conference. My mother laughed it off and said kids say silly things. When Allison was in middle school, she started this thing where she would go through my room when I wasn't home. She took my jewelry and my clothes, and when I confronted her, she would cry to our mother. Every single time my mother took her side. She said I was being selfish for not sharing with my little sister. She said families should support each other. I moved out the day after I graduated high school. I got a job at a call center and shared an apartment with 2 roommates in Metro Bay. I put myself through community college and then finished my bachelor's degree at a state university. It took me 6 years total, but I did it without asking my mother for a single dollar. During all this time, I still went back to Hartwell Estate for Thanksgiving and Christmas. The only reason I went was because my aunt and uncle and cousins would be there, and I actually liked seeing them. My mother always acted like we were this perfect happy family in front of everyone else. She would hug me and ask about my life and pretend she actually cared. Then the relatives would leave and she would go back to mostly ignoring me unless she needed something. Allison went to college on Richard's dime. She majored in communications and spent most of her time partying, from what I heard through Lillian. She graduated and moved back home because she couldn't find a job she actually wanted to do. She worked retail for a while and complained constantly about how boring it was. Then last year my mother started dating someone new. His name was Jeffrey, 38M, and he worked in pharmaceutical sales. She met him at some networking event she went to with a friend. Jeffrey seemed decent enough the first time I met him at Christmas last year. He was polite and he actually asked me questions about my job instead of just talking about himself the whole time. My mother was obsessed with him. She talked about him constantly. She showed everyone pictures of them on her phone. She started dressing younger and wearing more makeup. When Jeffrey proposed after 6 months of dating, she cried and called everyone in the family to tell them the news. The wedding was planned for early December at a country club in Marlow Heights. My mother sent me an invitation but didn't ask me to be in the wedding party. Allison was the maid of honor, obviously. I RSVP'd yes because again I wanted to see my extended family and it seemed easier than dealing with the drama of not going. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the wedding at the same country club. It was a Friday evening and about 40 people were there, including Jeffrey's family, who I was meeting for the first time. Everyone was dressed up and drinking champagne. My mother was wearing a white dress even though it was just the rehearsal, which I thought was a bit much, but whatever. Jeffrey gave a toast about how he never thought he would find love again after his divorce 5 years ago. He talked about how my mother made him laugh and how excited he was to start this new chapter. Everyone clapped and my mother stood up. I thought she was going to say something sweet back to him. Instead, she turned and looked directly at me. She said she needed to address something that had been weighing on her heart. She said she had discovered a betrayal that broke her trust completely. Then she said I had been having an affair with Jeffrey behind her back. The entire room went silent. I just sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth because I genuinely had no idea what she was talking about. I had barely spoken to Jeffrey except for that one time at Christmas and maybe twice on the phone when I called the house and he picked up. My mother said she had overheard a conversation at Jeffrey's office 2 weeks earlier when she stopped by to bring him lunch. She said she heard him talking about meeting up with someone and being attracted to them. She said she heard my name mentioned and put the pieces together. I started to say this was completely insane, but Jeffrey interrupted me. He stood up and put his hand on my mother's shoulder. He said she needed to let him explain what actually happened. Jeffrey said the conversation my mother overheard was him talking to his best man Greg about Allison. He said Allison had been texting him constantly since the engagement party. He said she had shown up at his apartment 3 times without calling first. He said she had sent him photos that were completely inappropriate. He said he was talking to Greg about how to handle it without embarrassing my mother because he didn't want to ruin the wedding. My mother turned to Allison and asked if this was true. Allison's face was red and she was gripping her wine glass so hard I thought it might break. She said Jeffrey was lying to cover his tracks. She said he had been leading her on for months. She said my mother was too old for him anyway and everyone could see it. Then Allison said she did all of those things because she thought Jeffrey would realize he made a mistake. She said he should be with her instead because she was younger and prettier and could actually give him kids if he wanted them. She said she was trying to help everyone by breaking up the wedding before it was too late. Jeffrey took a step back from the table. He said he was done and he was leaving. He walked out of the dining room and the sound of his car starting echoed through the parking lot a minute later. My mother just stood there. Then she turned to Allison and asked why she would do this. Allison said it was because she deserved to be happy too and Jeffrey was wasted on someone who was almost 60. She said a lot of other things I'm not going to repeat because they were pretty cruel even by her standards. I got up and left. I walked out to my car and drove back to Metro Bay that same night. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I just wanted to get out of there before someone tried to drag me back into whatever was happening. My cousin Lillian called me around midnight to tell me the rest. The wedding was cancelled obviously. Jeffrey had already texted the best man to say he was done and wanted nothing to do with my mother or her family. Allison had a screaming match with my mother in the parking lot about how she ruined everything. Then Allison called Richard and asked if she could stay with him for a while. Richard said yes and sent someone to pick her up that night. I thought that would be the end of it. I figured my mother would be too embarrassed to contact me after falsely accusing me in front of 40 people. I was wrong. 2 hours after I got home, I received a text message from her. It was long and I had to scroll through multiple screens to read the whole thing. She said she was sorry for accusing me publicly. Then she said she understood now why she always treated me and Allison differently. She said when I was born she felt like her life was over. She said I represented every opportunity she lost and every dream she had to give up. She said looking at me reminded her of being poor and struggling and fighting with her parents. Then she said when Allison was born she felt different because the child support checks meant she had financial stability for the first time. She said Allison represented security and a better future, so it was natural that she favored her. The text went on to say that now she realized Allison was selfish and ungrateful. She said she wasted 27 years investing in the wrong daughter. She said she wanted to make things right with me now and build a relationship we should have had all along. I read the text 3 times to make sure I understood it correctly. She wasn't actually apologizing for decades of treating me like garbage. She was just mad that Allison turned out to be a disappointment and now she wanted to upgrade me to favorite daughter as a backup plan. I didn't respond. I deleted the text and went to bed. Over the next few weeks Lillian kept me updated. Allison was working at Richard's company doing something in their marketing department. My mother had moved out of Hartwell Estate because she couldn't afford it without Jeffrey helping with bills. She was renting a 1-bedroom apartment in a cheaper part of Marlow Heights. She kept asking Lillian for my new phone number because I had blocked her original number after that text. I thought keeping my distance and not engaging would be enough. I thought eventually she would get the hint and leave me alone. Then she showed up at my apartment. Update 1: My mother showed up at my apartment last Thursday morning. I was getting ready for work when I heard knocking on my door. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing there with 2 suitcases. I didn't open the door. I asked through the door what she was doing there. She said she had sent me an email the week before explaining she was coming to stay with me for a while. She said she assumed I got it and was okay with it since I didn't say no. I told her I never got any email and she needed to leave. She said I should check my old college email account because that's where she sent it. I hadn't used that email in 5 years and I told her that. She said it wasn't her fault if I didn't keep up with my messages. I opened the door but kept the chain lock on. I told her she couldn't stay with me and she needed to go back to Marlow Heights. She said she already gave up her apartment because the rent was too expensive. She said she had nowhere else to go and I owed her this after everything she sacrificed for me. I said I didn't owe her anything. She raised her voice and said I was being selfish just like Allison. She said she gave me a chance to be the good daughter and I was throwing it away. She said I should be grateful she was willing to forgive me for staying silent when Jeffrey was supposedly pursuing me. I told her to leave or I would call the police. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and spit at my feet. She called me an ungrateful brat and said I would regret pushing her away. Then she picked up her suitcases and walked down the hallway. I watched through the peephole until she got in the elevator. Then I called my landlord and explained the situation. He said he would alert the front desk that she was not allowed in the building anymore. I thought that would be the end of it again. I was wrong again. The following Monday I was at work. I'm an operations coordinator at a logistics company in Metro Bay. We have an open floor plan office and my desk is near the main hallway. Around 11 in the morning, I looked up and saw my mother walking toward me. She was carrying a shopping bag and smiling like nothing was wrong. She waved at me and several of my coworkers turned to look. I got up immediately and walked over to her before she could reach my desk. I asked her what she was doing there. She said she wanted to take me to lunch. She said we could go to that sandwich place down the street and have a nice conversation like adults. She was speaking loudly enough that people nearby could hear. My manager Kate, 41F, came over and asked if everything was okay. My mother introduced herself and said she was just surprising her daughter at work. Kate looked at me and I could tell she knew something was off. I told my mother we needed to talk outside. She said we could just go to lunch right now and she would wait while I got my purse. I told her more firmly that we needed to go outside immediately. We went down to the lobby and I kept walking until we were outside the building. I told her she could not show up at my workplace. She said she didn't see what the big deal was. She said plenty of parents visit their kids at work. I told her she wasn't acting like a parent. I told her she was harassing me and she needed to stop. She said I was being dramatic. She said she just wanted to have lunch and talk about her moving in with me since her temporary housing situation wasn't working out. I asked where she was staying. She said she was at a motel near the highway but it was expensive and dirty. She said she had been staying there for 2 weeks and was running out of money. She said I could help her by letting her stay with me until she got back on her feet. I told her no. She asked why I was being so cruel. She said most daughters would be happy to help their mother in a difficult time. She said she was starting to think Allison was right about me being selfish. I walked back into my building and told the security guard at the front desk that the woman outside was not allowed in the building. He nodded and wrote something down. My mother was staring at us through the glass doors. When I got back to my desk, Kate called me into her office. She asked if I was safe and if I needed help with anything. I explained the basics of the situation and she said to let her know if my mother showed up again. She said workplace safety was a priority and they would handle it. I left work early that day because I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about my mother showing up and making a scene in front of my coworkers. I kept thinking about how she had found my apartment and now she had found my workplace and I didn't know where she would show up next. When I got home I called Lillian. She said my mother had been posting on social media about how her daughters had abandoned her. She said my mother was commenting on old photos from when we were kids and writing things like remember when we were a real family. Lillian said it was uncomfortable to watch. Lillian also told me that Allison had unfriended my mother on all social media. She said Richard had apparently set some boundaries with my mother about how often she could contact Allison at work. She said my mother had shown up at Richard's office building once and he had threatened to get a restraining order if she did it again. That's when I realized this wasn't going to stop on its own. My mother had lost control of both of her daughters and her fiancé in the span of a few weeks. She had lost her nice house and her comfortable life. Now she was spiraling and latching onto whoever she could find. I called a lawyer on Tuesday. His name was Mr. Sampson, 52M, and he specialized in family law. I explained everything that had happened starting from the rehearsal dinner. He said I had grounds for a restraining order based on the harassment and the showing up at my workplace. He filed the paperwork that week. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Mr. Sampson sent a cease and desist letter to the motel where my mother was staying. The letter stated she was not to contact me through any means or show up at my home or workplace. My mother called Lillian after she got the letter. Lillian said she was crying and asking why I was doing this to her. She said she just wanted to be close to me and I was treating her like a criminal. Lillian told her she needed to respect my boundaries and my mother hung up on her. The 3 weeks before the court date were quiet. My mother didn't try to contact me directly. But Lillian told me she was still posting things on social media. She posted a long rant about how modern children don't respect their parents anymore. She posted articles about elder abuse and tagged me in them until I blocked her on every platform. The court hearing was last Friday. My mother showed up without a lawyer. She was wearing a dress and had her hair done. She looked smaller somehow, like she had lost weight. The judge asked me to explain why I was requesting the restraining order. I laid out everything from the false accusation at the rehearsal dinner to showing up at my apartment with suitcases to appearing at my workplace. I brought printed copies of the text message she sent and screenshots of her social media posts. Then the judge asked my mother if she wanted to respond. She said I was exaggerating everything. She said she was just trying to rebuild a relationship with her daughter after a misunderstanding. She said daughters are supposed to take care of their mothers when they need help. The judge asked her if she understood that I had told her multiple times not to contact me. She said yes, but she thought I didn't really mean it. She said I was just upset about the wedding situation and would come around eventually. The judge granted the restraining order. My mother is not allowed within 500 feet of me or my home or my workplace for 1 year. She is not allowed to contact me through any means including phone calls, texts, emails, social media, or third parties. My mother started crying when the judge announced the decision. She said this wasn't fair and she was being punished for trying to be a good mother. The judge told her the hearing was over. I left the courthouse through a side exit because I didn't want to risk running into her in the parking lot. Mr. Sampson walked me to my car and said to contact him immediately if she violated the order. I drove home and sat in my apartment for a long time. The place was quiet. I made dinner and watched a movie and went to bed early. Lillian texted me on Saturday. She said my mother had posted something on social media about being legally prevented from seeing her daughter. She said several people had commented with support for my mother and said I should be ashamed of myself. Lillian said she left a comment defending me and then unfollowed my mother because it was too much drama. Update 2: The restraining order has been in place for almost 7 weeks now. My mother hasn't tried to contact me directly, but apparently, she's found other ways to make her presence known. 3 weeks ago I got a call from my supervisor Kate. She said someone had called the office asking to verify my employment. The person on the phone claimed to be from a bank processing a loan application I had supposedly submitted. Kate said something felt off about the call, so she didn't confirm anything and instead asked for a callback number. The person hung up immediately. Kate gave me a heads up in case someone was trying to steal my identity. But I had a feeling I knew who was really behind the call. I contacted Mr. Sampson and he said to document everything just in case. Then 2 weeks ago I got a letter in the mail from my mother's church. I had never been to this church and didn't even know she had started going to one. The letter was from the pastor asking if we could meet to discuss a family reconciliation. He said my mother had been attending services for the past month and had spoken to him about being estranged from her daughters. He said the church believes in the importance of family bonds and he wanted to help facilitate healing. I didn't respond to the letter. Mr. Sampson said technically using the pastor as an intermediary could be considered a violation of the restraining order, but it would be hard to prove my mother put him up to it. He said to keep the letter as documentation. Lillian called me around the same time. She said my mother had reached out to several other family members asking them to talk to me on her behalf. She contacted my uncle Bruce, 62M, who told her firmly that he wasn't getting involved. She contacted my cousin Jake, 29M, who didn't respond at all. She even tried to contact my father's sister, who I haven't seen since I was 10 years old. None of these attempts worked, but it was clear my mother was testing the boundaries of the restraining order. She wasn't contacting me directly, but she was doing everything she could to get around it. Meanwhile, I heard from Lillian that Allison was having her own issues. Apparently working for Richard wasn't going as well as Allison had hoped. Richard had hired her as a favor, but he actually expected her to do real work. Allison was used to skating by on minimal effort and it wasn't flying in a professional environment. Lillian heard through the family gossip chain that Richard had already spoken to Allison twice about her attendance and her attitude. Allison had been showing up late and leaving early and spending most of her time on her phone. Richard told her if she couldn't take the job seriously he would let her go regardless of their relationship. Allison had posted something vague on social media about how some people don't appreciate what they have until it's gone. Lillian said it was pretty clear she was talking about my mother and how easy she had it living at home with no real responsibilities. I didn't feel particularly sorry for Allison. She had spent years treating me badly and facing no consequences. Now she was getting a small taste of what it's like when people don't just hand you everything. But the real surprise came 4 weeks ago when I got home from work and found an envelope taped to my apartment door. My heart started racing because I thought maybe my mother had found a way around the building security again. The envelope had my name written on it in handwriting I didn't recognize. I opened it carefully in my apartment. Inside was a letter from Jeffrey. He apologized for reaching out but said he wanted me to know what happened after he left the rehearsal dinner. He said he had gone home that night and blocked my mother's number and deleted all of their photos together. He said he called the country club the next morning and canceled the wedding himself because he didn't trust my mother to actually do it. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. He said my mother had contacted him 2 weeks after the wedding was supposed to happen. She had shown up at his apartment building and tried to convince him that Allison had lied about everything. She said Allison was just trying to sabotage the wedding because she was jealous. She said they could still get married and everything would be fine. Jeffrey said he told her it was over and she needed to leave him alone. She kept showing up at his apartment building until he filed a police report for harassment. After that she finally stopped. But here's the part that really got me. Jeffrey said my mother had told him during one of these visits that she was planning to move in with me. She said I owed her a place to stay since I had ruined her wedding by not defending her against Allison. She said I was going to take care of her whether I wanted to or not because that's what daughters do. Jeffrey said he wanted to warn me that my mother seemed unstable and fixated. He said he was worried about my safety and thought I should know everything she had been saying. He left his email address at the bottom of the letter in case I needed to reach him. I sat on my couch reading the letter over and over. It confirmed what I already suspected, but seeing it written down by someone else made it more real. My mother genuinely believed I owed her something. She believed she could force her way into my life and I would eventually give in. I forwarded the information to Mr. Sampson. He said the letter from Jeffrey was helpful because it showed a pattern of harassing behavior across multiple people. He said if my mother violated the restraining order in any way we could use this as additional evidence. I also got some good news at work around this time. Kate called me into her office and told me I was being promoted to Senior Operations Coordinator. It came with a significant raise and more responsibilities. She said I had been doing excellent work and they wanted to invest in my future with the company. I accepted immediately. The promotion meant I could afford to move to a nicer apartment in a building with better security. It meant I could stop worrying as much about money. It meant I was building a life that had nothing to do with my mother or Allison or any of the mess they created. My first day in the new position was last Monday. Several of my coworkers took me out for lunch to celebrate. We went to a restaurant downtown and I ordered the most expensive thing on the menu because I could actually afford it now. For the first time in a long time I felt like things were moving in the right direction. I had a restraining order protecting me from my mother. I had a promotion at work. I had my own apartment and my own life that I had built myself. Lillian texted me that evening to congratulate me on the promotion. She said she had seen my LinkedIn update. Then she told me my mother had also seen it. My mother had apparently created a fake profile just to look at my page since I had blocked her on everything else. Lillian said my mother had called her afterward and cried about how I was doing so well without her. She said I had turned out successful despite her, not because of her. She said it wasn't fair that I got to be happy while she was living in a motel and couldn't even see her own daughter. I asked Lillian to stop telling me what my mother was saying. I said I appreciated the updates but I needed to focus on moving forward instead of constantly looking back. Lillian understood and said she would only contact me if it was something I absolutely needed to know. Update 3. It's been almost 4 months since the rehearsal dinner and a lot has happened. I'm writing this final update because I think I've reached a point where I can close this chapter completely. The restraining order is still in effect and will be for another 8 months. My mother violated it once about a month ago. She sent me a letter through certified mail which technically isn't allowed under the terms of the order. The letter was long and rambling. She talked about how she had been going to counseling at her church and learning about forgiveness. She said she forgave me for getting the restraining order and hoped I would forgive her for the misunderstanding at the rehearsal dinner. I didn't open the letter myself. I saw it was from her based on the return address and immediately took it to Mr. Sampson. He contacted the police and filed a violation report. My mother received a warning from law enforcement that any further contact would result in her being arrested. Since then there's been complete silence. Lillian says my mother has stopped posting about me on social media. She's stopped trying to use family members as intermediaries. She's apparently just working at some retail store near her motel and keeping to herself. I moved into my new apartment 6 weeks ago. It's in a high-rise building with a doorman and security cameras and key card access to the elevators. Nobody gets past the lobby without being verified by the resident they're visiting. I feel safe here in a way I never did at my old place. The apartment itself is a 1-bedroom with huge windows overlooking the city. I bought all new furniture and decorated it exactly how I wanted. There's nothing from my childhood home and nothing that reminds me of Marlow Heights. It's completely mine. Work has been going well too. The promotion came with new projects and I've been traveling occasionally to meet with clients in other cities. Last month I went to Chicago for a conference and met some interesting people in my field. My boss mentioned that there might be an opportunity to transfer to a different office if I wanted a change of scenery. I'm considering it. Allison reached out to me 3 weeks ago. She sent me a message on Instagram from a new account since I had blocked her old one. The message said she heard about my promotion and wanted to congratulate me. Then she said she had been thinking about everything that happened and realized she had made a lot of mistakes. She said she hoped we could talk sometime. I didn't respond. I thought about it for a few days but ultimately decided there was nothing to say. Allison had spent 27 years treating me like I was beneath her. She had tried to steal our mother's fiancé and then blamed everyone else when it blew up. Now she was working a job she hated for a father she barely knew and probably wanted to reconnect with me because she was lonely. But I didn't know her forgiveness or a second chance. I didn't know her anything. Lillian told me last week that Richard had finally fired Allison. Apparently, she had stopped showing up to work on time and had been rude to clients on multiple occasions. Richard gave her 2 warnings and then let her go. Allison moved out of his house immediately after and is now living with a friend somewhere in Marlow Heights. Lillian also said my mother tried to reach out to Richard after he fired Allison. She wanted to convince him to give Allison another chance. Richard told her he had no interest in discussing his business decisions with her, and if she contacted him again he would get a restraining order of his own. So now both of my mother's daughters are cut off from her. The golden child she invested everything in turned out to be entitled and lazy. The backup daughter she tried to guilt into taking care of her got a restraining order instead. Her fiancé left her. Her extended family is tired of her drama. She's alone in a motel room working retail at almost 60 years old. Part of me wonders if she understands yet that her own choices led to this. Part of me wonders if she'll ever take responsibility for how she treated me my entire life. But mostly I've stopped wondering about her at all. I had dinner with Lillian and my uncle Bruce last weekend. We went to a nice Italian place near their house and spent 3 hours just catching up. They asked about my new apartment and my promotion and my plans for the future. Nobody mentioned my mother or Allison. It was the first family dinner I'd had in years where I actually felt relaxed. Bruce told me he was proud of me for setting boundaries and sticking to them. He said too many people let toxic family members back into their lives out of guilt or obligation. He said I was smart to protect myself even when it was hard. Lillian said she had stopped following my mother on social media completely. She said it was too depressing to watch someone self-destruct and refuse to change. She said she would always be my cousin and my friend, but she was done playing messenger between me and my mother. I signed a lease for another year at my new apartment last week. I joined a gym in my building and started taking yoga classes on Saturday mornings. I'm planning a vacation to Portugal in the spring with some friends from college. I'm living my life without looking over my shoulder, constantly waiting for my mother to appear. The restraining order expires in 8 months. I'm not sure what will happen after that. Mr. Sampson said I can request an extension if I feel it's necessary. I'm going to wait and see how things go. For now I'm focusing on the things I can control. My career is going well. I have friends and family members who actually care about me. I have an apartment I love and hobbies I enjoy and plans for the future that don't involve anyone who treated me badly for decades. I spent 32 years trying to earn my mother's love and approval. I spent 32 years being told I was a burden and a disappointment. I spent 32 years watching my sister get everything while I got nothing. I'm done with all of that now. I didn't fix my relationship with my mother. I didn't reconcile with my sister. I didn't get the happy ending where everyone apologizes and we all become one big functional family. Instead I got a restraining order and a promotion and a new apartment and peace. And honestly that feels like more than enough. Now let's move to the next story. Story 2. My boyfriend's jealous female coworker who had secret feelings for him tried to transfer him 1,500 miles away from me without his permission, then spread rumors about us when he refused and filed a complaint with HR, but the truth eventually came out. I, 28F, have been with my boyfriend Avery, 29M, for just over 2 years now. We moved in together about a year ago and things have been generally good between us. Before Avery and I lived together, he shared an apartment with Victoria, 27F, a colleague from his company. They weren't romantically involved according to Avery, just friends who split rent in the expensive city we live in. About 6 weeks into our relationship, I met a group of Avery's coworkers at a company event. After Avery stepped away to get drinks, one of them mentioned something that caught me off guard. They said, "It's nice to finally meet Avery's girlfriend." We were all surprised when he started dating someone new, especially since everyone thought he and Victoria had something going on. Another coworker nodded and added that Avery and Victoria seemed extremely close and were practically inseparable at company functions. This information bothered me more than I wanted to admit. Avery had described Victoria as just a roommate and colleague, but according to his coworkers, there seemed to be more to the story. I tried to push these thoughts aside and enjoy the rest of the evening, but the comments lingered in my mind for weeks afterward. About a month later, Avery invited me to a dinner with several of his friends, including Victoria. Throughout the evening, I noticed how comfortable they were with each other, inside jokes, finishing each other's sentences, and a general familiarity that made me increasingly uncomfortable. Avery didn't seem to be hiding anything, but the way Victoria looked at him when she thought no one was watching sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I held my concerns in for another few weeks, but they continued to eat away at me. Then one night, after having too many drinks at a friend's birthday party, everything came to a head. Avery and I were walking home, and I blurted out everything, the comments from his coworkers, my observations about Victoria's behavior, and my fears that there was something he wasn't telling me about their past relationship. Avery stopped walking and turned to me with a surprised expression. I continued rambling about how I couldn't handle being the replacement or the second choice. I demanded to know if they had ever been romantically involved. My voice grew louder and more frantic with each question. People passing by on the street started looking at us. The whole situation was embarrassing and definitely not my finest moment. Avery firmly denied that anything had ever happened between him and Victoria. He explained that the office rumors started because they carpooled together and often ate lunch at the same table with other colleagues. He claimed people in the office liked to gossip, and since they lived together, assumptions were made. Avery assured me he had never seen Victoria as anything more than a friend and roommate. After we got home, I calmed down and apologized for my behavior. I told Avery that I believed him and that even if something had happened between them in the past, it wouldn't matter because I knew he was committed to our relationship now. Avery accepted my apology, and I thought that would be the end of it. A few days later, Avery mentioned that he had told Victoria about my breakdown, his words, not mine. This bothered me immensely. I hadn't even met Victoria properly at that point, and now her first impression of me would be as the jealous, insecure girlfriend who had a public meltdown about her. I asked Avery why he would share something so private with her, and he said he had always gone to Victoria for advice when he didn't know how to handle situations. I pointed out that this particular situation directly involved Victoria, which made his decision to discuss it with her inappropriate. Avery seemed genuinely surprised by this perspective, as if the thought hadn't occurred to him. Despite my discomfort with the situation, I decided to take the mature approach and address things directly with Victoria. I invited her out for coffee, hoping to make a better impression and clear the air. During our meeting, I apologized for jumping to conclusions based on office gossip and explained that I had been in a particularly vulnerable place that night. Victoria nodded and smiled politely, but her eyes remained cold. She accepted my apology verbally, but something in her manner told me she wasn't letting this go. In the months that followed, I made several genuine attempts to build a friendship with Victoria. I remembered her birthday with a thoughtful gift related to her favorite hobby, photography. I helped her move into a new apartment when she had to rush back to her hometown for a family emergency. I even arranged a private tour of a local craft brewery after overhearing Avery mention it was a place she had always wanted to visit. Despite these efforts, Victoria's attitude toward me never warmed. As Avery and I grew closer and eventually moved in together, his direct contact with Victoria outside of work naturally decreased. They still saw each other at the office daily, and occasionally at gatherings with mutual friends, but the dynamic had shifted. Avery seemed oblivious to the tension between Victoria and me, or perhaps he simply chose to ignore it for the sake of peace. At these group gatherings, Victoria consistently treated me with subtle disdain. She would greet everyone in the room except me. When I spoke, she would either talk over me or roll her eyes when she thought no one was looking. If I joined a conversation she was part of, she would find a reason to move away or change the subject. These behaviors were subtle enough that Avery never seemed to notice, but obvious enough that other friends occasionally gave me sympathetic glances. After numerous failed attempts to win her over, I eventually gave up trying. I decided it wasn't worth the energy anymore. When Avery asked why I had stopped making an effort with Victoria, I simply told him that I had tried my best, but some people just don't click. I wasn't going to force a friendship that clearly wasn't meant to be. About 8 months ago, Victoria received a promotion that put her in a management position above Avery. Her new role involved overseeing company expansion, including the opening of new branches in different cities. Avery was genuinely happy for her success and never expressed any discomfort about their changed professional dynamic. Last month, Avery mentioned during dinner that Victoria had approached him about an opportunity to head up a new branch office in a city approximately 1,500 miles away. The position would require him to relocate for at least 2 years, with only occasional trips back home. Avery told me he had immediately declined the offer, explaining to Victoria that he was established here with me and had no interest in a long-distance relationship or asking me to uproot my life and career. I thought that was the end of it until 2 weeks later when Avery came home visibly frustrated. He explained that despite his clear refusal, Victoria had submitted his name as a candidate for the position anyway. Her reasoning, according to Avery, was that he was the most experienced person in the department and would be the best choice for establishing the new location successfully. Avery had discovered this only when the department head congratulated him on being in the running for the prestigious opportunity. Avery insisted he would decline again, more formally this time, but I couldn't help feeling that Victoria's actions were deliberately calculated to create distance between us. Avery dismissed this idea, attributing her actions to professional considerations rather than personal motives. His inability to see what appeared obvious to me was frustrating, but I decided not to push the issue and create unnecessary conflict. Instead, I asked Avery if we could have an honest conversation about boundaries regarding Victoria. I explained that while I would never ask him to end his friendship with her, I did have some requests that would make me more comfortable. First, I preferred that he not discuss our relationship issues with Victoria. Second, I would rather not attend small gatherings where she would be present, though I could tolerate larger events where I could easily avoid direct interaction with her. And third, I asked that he be more observant of how she treated me when we were in the same space. Avery seemed disappointed by my boundaries but promised to respect them. He maintained that if I gave Victoria more time, she would eventually warm up to me. I reminded him that 2 years was plenty of time, and my extensive efforts to befriend her had gone unreciprocated. At this point, I was done trying. A week after our conversation, one of Avery's colleagues organized a department dinner to celebrate a successful quarter. Avery asked if I would attend with him, mentioning that Victoria would be there but so would about 15 other people. I agreed, figuring I could handle one evening in a large group. Before the dinner, I asked Avery to pay attention to how Victoria interacted with me but not to say anything to her about it. I wanted him to observe her behavior without her being on guard. When we arrived at the restaurant, Victoria greeted Avery with an enthusiastic hug but completely ignored my presence beside him. Avery gave me a subtle look that told me he had noticed. Throughout the meal, Victoria demonstrated her usual pattern of behavior, interrupting me mid-sentence, visibly tuning out when I spoke, and making dismissive gestures when I contributed to the conversation. Each time, I caught Avery watching these interactions with increasing awareness. During a moment when Victoria left the table, Avery leaned over and whispered that he could clearly see what I had been talking about and apologized for not noticing sooner. This acknowledgement meant more to me than he probably realized. As the evening was winding down, one of Avery's colleagues raised a toast to Avery's exciting new chapter and wished him luck with the move to the new branch location. Avery and I exchanged confused glances. Avery immediately clarified that he had declined the position and had no plans to relocate. There was an awkward silence before Victoria chimed in, saying that Avery was one of the top candidates and the decision wasn't finalized yet. Avery's expression hardened as he explained to the table that he had explicitly removed himself from consideration weeks ago. The implication was clear: Victoria had gone behind his back a second time, somehow convincing management to keep him in the running despite his refusal. We left the dinner shortly afterward. In the car, Avery was uncharacteristically quiet. When we got home, he finally spoke up. He admitted that he had been blind to Victoria's behavior and motives for too long. He said he now believed my suspicion that Victoria had feelings for him and was deliberately trying to create problems between us. The following Monday, Avery requested a department transfer to remove himself from Victoria's direct supervision. He also filed a formal complaint with HR about her professional boundary violations regarding the transfer situation. HR took the matter seriously, documenting the incident and launching an investigation into Victoria's conduct. Avery also began exploring job opportunities at other companies, recognizing that the situation with Victoria might make his current workplace uncomfortably tense moving forward. He apologized again for not seeing the situation clearly sooner and promised to be more aware of how his friends and colleagues treated me in the future. While the situation with Victoria remains unresolved, Avery and I have emerged from this experience with a stronger understanding and appreciation for each other. Avery now recognizes the importance of standing up for our relationship, and I appreciate his willingness to take action once he saw the truth of the situation. Update 1. First, thank you everyone for the supportive comments on my original post. The situation with Avery, Victoria, and me has continued to develop over the past few weeks, and not all of it in ways I expected. After Avery filed the complaint with HR about Victoria putting his name in for the transfer despite his refusal, things at his workplace became tense. Avery told me that HR called both him and Victoria in for separate meetings. During Avery's meeting, he laid out exactly what happened, how he had verbally declined the transfer opportunity when Victoria first mentioned it, then formally removed himself from consideration when he discovered she had submitted his name anyway, only to find out at the dinner that she had somehow kept him in the running without his knowledge or consent. HR took it seriously enough that they escalated the issue to senior management. 3 days after filing the complaint, Avery was called into a meeting with the department director, the HR representative, and surprisingly, the company's COO. They apologized for the confusion and assured Avery that his name had been removed from consideration for the transfer. They also informed him that they were taking his complaint about Victoria seriously and would be conducting a thorough investigation. Meanwhile, Avery went ahead with his request to transfer to a different department. His request was approved surprisingly quickly, and he was moved to a team that works on domestic projects rather than international expansion. This meant he would no longer report directly to Victoria, though they would still occasionally need to collaborate on certain projects. The first week after Avery's department transfer was relatively quiet. He said Victoria kept her distance at work, and they only interacted when absolutely necessary for professional reasons. I started to think maybe the situation would resolve itself without further drama. I was wrong. Last weekend, Avery received multiple text messages from mutual friends who still worked directly with Victoria. Apparently, she had been telling people that Avery requested the transfer because he couldn't handle working for a woman and that his complaint to HR was a vindictive attempt to sabotage her career after she rejected his advances. She had effectively flipped the entire narrative, portraying herself as the victim and Avery as the aggressor. Avery was blindsided by this information. Several colleagues he considered friends were now giving him cold shoulders, having only heard Victoria's version of events. One friend, Marcus, was kind enough to warn Avery about what was being said. Marcus told Avery that Victoria had been particularly convincing in her story, even shedding tears during a team lunch while describing how betrayed she felt by Avery's actions. Avery immediately contacted HR again to inform them of this new development. The HR representative advised him to document all instances of defamation and assured him that this information would be added to the ongoing investigation. They also suggested Avery refrain from discussing the situation with other colleagues to avoid escalating tensions in the workplace. That same weekend, we were supposed to attend a birthday party for one of our mutual friends, Kate. We knew Victoria would likely be there, but decided to go anyway since it was a larger gathering where we could easily keep our distance. When we arrived, the atmosphere immediately felt awkward. People who had previously been warm and welcoming toward Avery now barely acknowledged him. A few gave me particularly cold looks, making me wonder what Victoria might have said about me as well. Kate, the birthday girl, pulled Avery aside about an hour into the party. I couldn't hear their conversation, but Avery's expression grew increasingly troubled. When he returned to my side, he suggested we leave early. Once in the car, he explained that Kate had reluctantly told him that Victoria had been spreading rumors not just at work but among their friend group as well. According to Kate, Victoria had told several people that I was unstable and pathologically jealous, referencing the incident from 2 years ago when I had questioned Avery about their relationship. She had also implied that Avery was unhappy in our relationship but felt trapped because we lived together. These rumors explained the cold reception we had received at the party. Avery was furious. He texted Marcus asking for the names of everyone at work who had heard Victoria's false narrative. Marcus provided a list of about a dozen people, including 2 senior managers. Avery decided he needed to address this situation more aggressively than simply waiting for HR to complete their investigation. The following Monday, Avery requested another meeting with HR and the department director. During this meeting, he presented text message evidence of the rumors Victoria was spreading both at work and socially. He emphasized that her actions had created a hostile work environment and were causing significant damage to his professional reputation and personal relationships. The HR representative and director appeared genuinely concerned by this escalation. They informed Avery that they would be calling Victoria in immediately for another discussion and would consider more serious disciplinary actions. They also offered to arrange a mediated conversation between Avery and Victoria to clear the air, but Avery declined, stating that he no longer felt comfortable being in a room alone with someone who was actively trying to damage his reputation. 2 days later, Avery received an unexpected email from the company's legal department requesting a meeting. I waited anxiously at home while he attended this meeting, worried about what new development might be occurring. When Avery returned that evening, he looked simultaneously relieved and troubled. The legal team had informed him that after reviewing all the evidence, they found Victoria's actions constituted workplace harassment and potentially defamation. They were preparing to issue her a formal warning and would require her to attend workplace behavior training. However, they also wanted Avery to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the entire situation. Avery asked for time to consider this request and consulted with a lawyer friend before making any decisions. His friend advised that while the NDA would prevent Avery from discussing the specifics of the case or the company's handling of it, it would also likely come with a settlement that could be beneficial if Avery was considering leaving the company anyway. As it stands now, Avery is weighing his options. He's received interest from 2 other companies after quietly putting out feelers about new positions. At the same time, his current employer seems eager to retain him and resolve the situation, offering not just the settlement but also a potential promotion to a newly created position that would put him on equal footing with Victoria professionally. I've told Avery I'll support whatever decision he makes. My main concern has been how this situation affected our relationship, and ironically, Victoria's attempts to drive us apart have actually brought us closer together. Avery now fully understands why I was uncomfortable around Victoria all these years, and he's apologized multiple times for not seeing her behavior clearly sooner. Our social circle has also begun to realign as more people learn the truth about Victoria's fabrications. Kate has been particularly supportive, reaching out to apologize for initially believing some of what Victoria had said and offering to host a smaller gathering soon with only friends who have not bought into the drama. I'll update again once Avery makes his decision about the NDA and his future with the company. Update 2. The past 2 months have been quite eventful. After much consideration, Avery decided to sign the NDA and accept a settlement from his company. The terms prevent him from discussing specific details about the situation with Victoria or the company's handling of it, but he was allowed to inform close friends and family that the matter had been resolved satisfactorily. The settlement amount wasn't life-changing, but it was substantial enough to give Avery some financial flexibility while he considered his next career move. Despite the company's offer of a promotion, Avery ultimately decided it was time for a fresh start elsewhere. He accepted a position at a competitor firm that offered similar work with slightly better pay and, most importantly, a clean slate professionally. His last day at the old company was 3 weeks ago, and he started the new job last week. Before Avery left his previous workplace, something unexpected happened. One of his closer colleagues, Trevor, asked to meet for lunch during their final week working together. During this lunch, Trevor revealed something that shed new light on Victoria's obsession with Avery. Apparently, before Avery and I started dating, Victoria had confided in Trevor that she had feelings for Avery and was planning to tell him once their lease renewal came up. Her plan, according to Trevor, was to suggest they stop being just roommates and try dating. However, before she could execute this plan, Avery met me, and within a few months, he decided not to renew the lease with Victoria and instead moved in with me. Trevor explained that he never mentioned this to Avery before because he thought it wasn't his place to share Victoria's private feelings. However, after witnessing her increasingly destructive behavior and the damage it caused to Avery's reputation at work, Trevor felt he needed to come clean. He apologized for not speaking up sooner and admitted he should have said something when Victoria first started spreading rumors. This revelation confirmed what I had suspected all along. Victoria's hostility toward me wasn't just about a 2-year-old drunken incident, it was rooted in jealousy and unrequited feelings for Avery. When Trevor asked if Avery had ever suspected Victoria's feelings, Avery admitted he had been completely blindsided. He had always viewed their relationship as purely platonic and professional. As for Victoria herself, we've heard through mutual acquaintances that she received a formal reprimand from the company and was required to attend both harassment training and professional counseling. She was also removed from the expansion project and reassigned to a different area with less autonomy. There are rumors that she's looking for employment elsewhere now that her professional reputation has taken a hit, but nothing confirmed yet. Our social circle has largely settled as well. The friends who initially believed Victoria's lies have mostly come around after learning more details. Kate has been particularly supportive, organizing several gatherings that deliberately excluded Victoria to give everyone space to rebuild relationships without tension. A few people remain firmly in Victoria's camp, but they were never particularly close to either Avery or me, so their distance hasn't been a significant loss. Avery's new job has been going well so far. His new colleagues seem friendly and professional, and he's enjoying the challenge of learning new systems and processes. The company culture appears healthier, with less office politics and gossip than his previous workplace. Avery mentioned that his new manager has already expressed appreciation for his experience and ideas, which has helped boost his confidence after the difficult past few months. On a personal level, Avery and I have used this experience to have several meaningful conversations about communication and trust in our relationship. Avery acknowledged that he should have been more aware of how Victoria was treating me and taken my concerns seriously from the beginning. I admitted that I could have been more direct about my discomfort instead of trying to win Victoria over with gestures of friendship when my instincts were telling me something was off. We've also discussed boundaries regarding workplace relationships moving forward. Avery has promised to be more mindful about sharing details of our personal life with colleagues, especially when it involves disagreements or vulnerable moments. I've agreed to be more forthcoming about my feelings rather than trying to manage uncomfortable situations on my own. One unexpected positive outcome of this whole ordeal is that we've started discussing our long-term future more seriously. The possibility of Avery being transferred across the country forced us to consider what we would do if faced with geographic separation, and those hypothetical conversations evolved into more concrete discussions about where we see our relationship going. While we're not rushing into any major decisions, we've begun talking about the possibility of engagement within the next year. Overall, while the situation with Victoria was stressful and disruptive, I believe Avery and I have emerged stronger as a couple. We've learned important lessons about trust, communication, and standing up for each other that will serve us well moving forward. Avery has promised to update me if he hears anything more about Victoria through industry connections, but honestly, I'm hoping we can put this chapter behind us entirely and focus on building our future together. Update 3. It's been half a year since my last update, and I wanted to share what's happened since then, as this will likely be my final post about the situation with Avery, Victoria, and me. Avery has been thriving at his new company. Within 4 months, he was given additional responsibilities that came with a modest raise. His colleagues respect his expertise, and he's built positive professional relationships without the underlying drama that characterized his previous workplace. He often comments on how refreshing it is to go to work without wondering what new rumor or complication might be waiting for him. As for Victoria, we've managed to avoid direct contact with her, but we occasionally hear updates through our remaining mutual connections. About 3 months ago, she finally left Avery's former company. According to office gossip, she was passed over for a promotion she felt entitled to, which prompted her resignation. Interestingly, she didn't secure another position before leaving, which was unusual given her previous career-focused attitude. Last month, Kate ran into Victoria at a coffee shop downtown. During their brief conversation, Victoria mentioned she was taking time to reassess her career path and was considering moving to another state where her sister lives. Kate described Victoria as subdued and less confident than before, suggesting the professional and social fallout from her actions had taken a toll. While I don't wish hardship on anyone, there's a certain poetic justice in seeing natural consequences unfold. Our social circle has largely stabilized. Most of our mutual friends have maintained relationships with both Avery and me while distancing themselves from Victoria after learning about her behavior. A few people who were closer to Victoria than to us have drifted away naturally, which feels like a healthy separation rather than a dramatic falling out. The most surprising development came about 2 months ago when Avery received an email from Trevor, his former colleague. Trevor shared that he'd recently had dinner with Victoria, who had apparently done some reflection on her actions. According to Trevor, Victoria acknowledged that her feelings for Avery had clouded her professional judgment and damaged multiple relationships. She asked Trevor to pass along an apology to Avery, saying she wasn't ready to deliver it personally but wanted him to know she regretted her behavior. Avery read the email to me, and we discussed how to respond. Ultimately, Avery sent a brief, polite reply thanking Trevor for passing along the message and acknowledging Victoria's apology without explicitly accepting or rejecting it. He wished her well in her future endeavors but didn't invite further communication. This measured response felt appropriate, recognizing the olive branch without reopening a door we've deliberately closed. On a personal note, Avery and I have continued to strengthen our relationship. The challenges we faced with Victoria forced us to improve our communication and develop stronger boundaries as a couple. When disagreements arise now, we address them directly rather than letting them simmer, a valuable lesson learned from our experience. Last weekend, During a hike to a scenic overlook we visited several times throughout our relationship, Avery proposed. The moment was private and meaningful, exactly what I would have wanted. The ring he chose reflects my taste perfectly, nothing flashy or ostentatious, but thoughtful and elegant. We haven't set a date yet, but we're considering next fall for a small ceremony with close friends and family. As we plan our wedding, we've naturally discussed the guest list. Without mentioning Victoria by name, Avery brought up the question of whether we should invite any of his former colleagues. We decided to include only those who have maintained genuine friendships with us outside of the workplace context, which effectively excludes anyone who sided with Victoria during the conflict. Kate has enthusiastically volunteered to help with wedding planning and has already suggested several venues that would suit our preference for a low-key celebration. Her support throughout the Victoria situation has transformed what was once a casual friendship into one of our closest relationships. Looking back on this whole experience, I'm struck by how what seemed like a minor incident, my drunken breakdown 2 years ago, spiraled into such significant consequences for everyone involved. Victoria's inability to move past that moment and her unrequited feelings for Avery eventually cost her professionally and socially. Avery learned important lessons about recognizing manipulation and standing firm in his boundaries. And I gained confidence in my intuition and the value of direct communication. While I wouldn't wish to relive the stress and uncertainty of the past 2 years, I can appreciate how these challenges shaped us individually and as a couple. Avery and I have built a stronger foundation for our future together, with clearer communication, greater trust, and a deeper appreciation for having each other's backs when it matters most. Thank you to everyone who offered support and advice throughout this journey. Your perspectives helped us navigate a difficult situation and come out stronger on the other side. I won't be posting further updates about this specific situation, but I'm grateful for the community that helped us through it.